A person is purely talented if they have the capability to bring out the hidden talent in another person. My guest on this episode of Passing the Torch is an effective leader and communicator, trusted mentor, and qualified intelligence professional with over 10 years of recognized superior performance across a variety of positions working in the military industry. He is also experienced in advising executive leadership on strategic decisions, program management, and leading diverse teams to success. Lastly, my guest is someone I met in August of 2022. Since that initial introduction, I continue to be amazed by his presence, attitude, and overall drive to evolve whatever team he is assigned to. Without further ado, Passing the Torch with Trevion Jones starts now. You have a great smile.
Thank you.
Man, first and foremost, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me. This is awesome. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. Did I get everything right? Was that pretty good?
I mean, it sounded good to me, so I will thumbs up on my end.
No, I told you, I stayed up till 1 a.m. Researching you, and I don't say that for sympathy. I say that just for how much you mean to me and the positive impact you've had on me. And just a bit of context, I researched you on LinkedIn. And so if you get any notification that says one anonymous search, it's me.
Perfect.
I showed you my book earlier, and I've wanted to have you on my show for quite a while now. Man, there's just something about you. And I'm going to make a prediction that one day you're going to be a general. And when you are, I'm like, I know, I told y'all.
I appreciate that.
So that's the whole context of why I wanted you on. And again, there's just something very magnetic, and like I can't imagine anyone not liking you. But aside from that, I want to talk to you about talent management, because I think that's a conversation we had, I think last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. And it was just like, man, that's really interesting. But before we get into that, I have one random question.
Sure.
Is please discuss I Could Be.
I Could Be is pretty much a digital mentoring platform. So what it is you go in, you build a profile as a mentor. You set up how many mentees you can accept, and what that does is that connects you with students, usually in underprivileged or disenfranchised communities, for you to just kind of work through their personal goals and what things that they want to get involved with, either a part of a particular program at their school or what they want to do post high school. So it was a cool opportunity. You don't have face-to-face opportunities just because these are high school students typically, but getting to hear what thoughts, perspectives, or what dreams a person under the age of 18, typically in that high school range, might have for themselves or where they see themselves in the world was very, very important to me, and why I decided to step into that particular mentorship program. So I've had a lot of successes in terms of connecting with young, brilliant individuals, and just like the personal satisfaction of how do I become a better mentor to these folks, right? It's easy just in my line of work to say, hey, I can mentor this type of person, whether it's an enlisted person, a junior officer, et cetera, but to work with a whole different ballpark of individuals, it was definitely a good challenge that I'm happy to be part of.
That's very interesting to me, because how old were the kids again?
So they're typically high school range.
Right. So, 16, 17, Absolutely. 18. And like most kids around that age, like there's a lot of potential, but it's a lot of raw potential. What did you learn about talent management or how to evaluate talent? Because it's easy for us to evaluate talent now, I think, in the military, or at least there's something to go off of.
Absolutely.
But back then, I mean, that's literally as raw as it can get. But yeah, what's something that you learned that you didn't expect to learn with regard to talent management?
I think that's, and it's probably what led to our conversation last week, and just kind of where my mind has been, especially as I've progressed, right, in my own personal career. Like you said, 16, 17 is a very raw age to kind of understand what you bring. And I say what you bring being the attributes, what things you're naturally good at, what are the innate abilities that you're going to provide to whatever situation. So I think being able to communicate as a mentor, how to acknowledge, how to support, and how to help that individual kind of discover those things because I mean, we were all in their shoes, right? When I look back at my time being 16, 17, I was working part-time job. I've been working since I was 15 and a half. So my mom likes to joke that I've never been unemployed, knock on wood. But I've been working since I was 16 and a half. I had my own personal interest being part of JROTC, obviously school. And so you know the things that you have interest in. You know the things that people might gravitate towards, but you usually can't put that into perspective for yourself, especially at that age. So to be able to do that and learn how to communicate that from my perspective, or how to cultivate that from my perspective, is probably the biggest thing I learned. Again, in the setting that we're in, being in the military, it's easy to tie that to a specific task or a specific experience you've given them. But with individuals you've never met or never going to meet in person, and just kind of seeing it all through a digital platform, i.e. words on a screen, it's a little bit more of what am I reading between the lines? Where does this person really see themselves? What questions do I ask to kind of pull that thread out of them? So I'll say that's probably the biggest lesson I learned by partaking in the ICB program.
I want to tie that into your education background.
Yeah.
I think there's a common thread between your stuff with I could be, identifying. There's a lot of lessons learned from that time, absolutely, right? But you have a master's in organizational leadership, a bachelor's in psychology, and so you're probably like, oh my God.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it works.
By the way, before I forget, did you ever meet Kawhi Leonard?
I have not.
Because he went to San Diego State the same time as you.
I have not. I was a terrible student. I was trying to focus and be involved in ROTC. So.
I know. I just saw that you graduated the same year or whatever. You were there at the same time, but that's neither here nor there. But again, master's in organizational leadership, bachelor's in psychology. How can talent management affect organizational change and promote growth in others to achieve common goals?
I think when I look in talent management and I look at your question of how does it help people kind of achieve organizational goals, is people have to see what their purpose is in the workplace. Yeah. People can come, get a paycheck, and just kind of produce the widget, right? That's easy. Absolutely. I can give you a solid paycheck just if you want to come and produce a widget. But for you to come into the place and be encouraged or supported to say, hey, you're bringing this specific attribute to this problem set, or I need you on my team because you're looking at it through this lens, which may be a lens I'm not familiar with or a lens that I'm necessarily strong in myself. That brings a new purpose, right? And that's where people can see themselves in the organization, and that seeing themselves in the organization provides longevity to the organization, right? Because you're going to want to find a place where you can be your authentic self. And I know authenticity is thrown around a lot nowadays, but it really does drive, do I feel like I belong? In the organization that we're in, right, being the Air Force, you can make the most of your experience, whether it's the 4, 8, 10, 20 years that you're in, but that experience is yours. So how long you stay in, how far you will go, what connections you will have, the impact you will make really drives from you saying, hey, this is what I know. I am going to bring part of this big pot of smart brains and brilliant people. This is what I'm going to bring uniquely, and this is how I'm going to apply that to whatever problem set you're getting after. So I say change can happen from those perspectives. Change can happen from cultivating those perspectives and saying, hey, there's room for that conversation. There's room for that way of thinking. There's room for that way of action to build a path forward. So I think that's where my mind has gone when it comes to talent management, supporting different attributes of the diverse teams I've had and how I've seen some of the better change management processes take place in the organizations I've been a part of.
No, and I want to explore a little bit deeper on that, because we talked about diverse teams, and typically when we say diverse, we're thinking like, hey, we have to have certain races and like a mix of races and genders and ethnicities. But I always think, and that's great because people are going to have different mindsets and how they feel. But I always want to take it a step further, absolutely, right? So aside from race and gender, because those are attributes that people look for, right, when building diverse teams. How important, or do you think people shy away from authenticity and maybe outliers, or someone who's, for lack of a better term, an outcast? They're like, they don't really fit they're not traditional in terms of going with the flow. Absolutely. Or, but just again, just to kind of summarize that, do you think people shy away from those attributes when building a team from people who are authentic and outliers or outcasts?
I can definitely see that, right? I think a lot of pressure, whatever rank, whatever uniform you're wearing, whether you're part of our civilian contractor or military personnel, there's a certain pressure to perform to that rank or a preconceived notion of what that title, role, rank, position should look like. I know when I was young, and I tell my junior officers today, I remember when I came in and I thought, hey, Lieutenant Jones has to perform like this because this is what a lieutenant should do and this is how a lieutenant should act, should be, etc. And to some degree, there are going to be some standards, right, of what we expect of just folks within the service. But then there also comes a piece to say, well, I'm going to have this rank and I'm going to do good work and I'm going to have these certain roles. So I'm going to make whatever Lieutenant, Captain, Major Jones be is whatever I'm going to bring to the table, right? Because that's where I'm going to find success at. That's what's going to be natural to me. So I think when I look at that and say, do those outliers fit in? I can absolutely see those outliers feeling like they don't have a place in. But then that comes the piece of mentorship. That comes where sponsors come into place. Someone's going to kind of look at them and say, hey, like you have something. I know you don't think that this is providing value to this, but this is where I can see this bringing success to the team, or this is that missing piece that we might not have.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to, on both ends, right? Whether it's a junior person or the more senior person, to both come to a mutual agreement and say, hey, like I'm going to tap into those and I'm going to bring those into the spaces that you feel like they typically would not be accepted in.
What patterns have you noticed in the successful talent you have ended up selecting? Or what patterns, if you were selected as part of like a high performing team, like, hey, I could see like we look different or may seem different, but I could see like why we're all in the.
I think a lot of it comes with the self-awareness, right? So
that's good.
I think so now I'm at a point where I'm leading small teams, right? To have large impacts. I have to be self-aware of myself to kind of say, hey, these are things I'm bringing to the table. But to use myself as an example, I know I am not a task person. Like I can do small tasks, but I know that's just not where I'm comfortable. I can think big thoughts. I can have pie in the sky dreams. I can whiteboard all day, but I'm not the person to be able to sit down and work on the smaller task. Not that that's a bad thing, but having the ability to have that self-awareness and also look at, okay, who in the room is that naturally coming to? Do I have someone in the room where we're able to just mesh and meld minds, and I'm able to have them kind of execute some of what I'm thinking, right? Or vice versa. Hey, ma'am, I know that you are very task-oriented. I want to be your hype man. I want to go out. I want to champion this. I want to take this the full 10 yards or 100 yards, right? I think having that self-awareness to say, okay, like what is missing in the room? What are the things I bring? And what are the things that are going to complement me or this team for us to find success? I think that's what I've seen in successful teams is that perfect blend or close to perfect blend of the different skill sets that people are bringing to that fold.
Who would be your hype man?
Who would be my hype man? Oh, that's a great question.
I have a recommendation in case you don't.
I would love to hear your recommendation.
Mo Love.
Absolutely.
I like him a lot, and he cracks me up. Like because he says what needs to be said, but it hits. It's like, and he's not shy about it. But it's one of the things. No pun intended, because he's like 6'7". But I do look up to him.
Absolutely, and I think it's funny that you bring up Mo Love because that's one of the folks who I look closely to as a mentor, right? I think because both of us, our personalities are different, right? We just look at leadership not very differently, but differently in how we operate from. But to have Mo Love, and what I'm very thankful for is I'm able to come to him and bounce off my ideas and able to kind of put a frame around some of the pie in the sky ideas of like, hey, this isn't just going to be a large goal that's not obtainable, but you're able to give me that realistic perspective and be the hype person and say, okay, TJ, this is how it can look or what it can look like. I want to help support you, but like, let's put a frame around that so it can actually become an executable thing. So that just is a perfect case study, right? I don't know if it led to your next question of how that diverse train of thought can lead to success. from a mentee perspective in my shoes to a mentor perspective.
So same for me. I got the chance to know him over the past year before he left. And at some point, he and I are going to do a podcast about, he has this thing about a topic called decision fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's going to be a good one. So I'm super excited. By the way, Haley Hartstein would be mine. I feel like she
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned decision fatigue because that was a lesson then Major Love taught young Captain Jones when I was exec at the group level. He taught me how to take care of my commander's time because decision fatigue is a thing, right? Yeah. I think we think to just throw a bunch of things on our boss's calendar and say you have to accomplish all these things, but we're human. So I'm very excited for that taping.
I'm going to go back to the last question, and he talked about like, hey, recognizing I'm not good at this, or I'm good at it, but it's not my strongest suit, right? Absolutely. And I'm best here, so I need to put my energy and focus here. Let's pick someone who's ideal for this role. But we do all have, whether it's an unconscious bias or whatever. But what's an example of when your personal grip has been a bit too tight around your own beliefs?
Oh, that's a great question.
Thanks, by the way. Like that was a 12:45 question.
Personal grip around my own beliefs. I would say probably the times where I feel crunched for time and I feel like I am not making the space or the room for people to offer their insight. And I feel like, hey, this is the idea of where we need to go, and we're just going to execute. And I understand as a leader, sometimes that's pertinent and that's necessary. But in a normal situation, I should understand, hey, I'm not getting all the information. So why am I not taking the step back and saying like, hey, I need to actually consult with other people and say, let's execute this. That's where I would probably say what comes to mind when I think of like my own personal grip around my beliefs, whether it is if I feel like I've already come to the decision from an emotional standpoint or from an information standpoint, and that I don't need other avenues or other injects into that, which obviously you can probably imagine what the result of that came to, right? Or even if it was a success, there were the secondary and tertiary effects that aren't things that I would have, today version of me would have said, yeah, this is how I would have wanted that to go. I have a great interviewer.
No, stop. I was joking around about, I say I research you. That's the professional way of saying I stalked you these days. Like, yeah, I was researching you for my podcast. It's like, my wife was like, what are you doing? Like at 2:00 in the morning, like,
here's this random picture.
Laptop,
right, exactly.
When you said talent management, like that, I knew I've wanted to have you on my podcast, but I couldn't quite find, like, there's so many things I want to talk about. And in my mind, I think TJ, right? But I was like, I want to talk to TJ about this, that, but there's so many different things.
Absolutely.
But when you said talent management, I was like, that's it right there. Because like, to me, you're someone I'd want on the team because you're like, if there's a room full of 100 people, you're one of those 10 that's a key stakeholder or a key influencer, right? Like people are going to follow. So I love that. So that's why I was like, when you said talent management, and then when I saw that your education background and then your volunteer mentorship background, I'm like, oh man, this stuff was flowing. It's like Dr. Dre just writing down lyrics and stuff.
That's a perfect and timely happy 50 years to hip hop.
Is it really? Yeah.
It is. It is.
Yeah, man, because it doesn't seem like it's 50 years.
Exactly. Because music is timeless.
That's great. Yeah, you're right. Music is timeless. Maybe talent management is timeless. But listening to all that stuff, we were talking beforehand about what I listened to in the 90s growing up, and it was still fresh. Anyway, we're not here to talk about my music preference or my failed boy bands dreams. So something I heard in a podcast earlier this year, and I started saying it in some staff meetings, and I know we're in a lot of meetings together, so maybe you heard me say this, but I'm always talking about the importance of critical thinking and the significance of like that should be part of when we say culture, like, hey, we need to build a culture. I'm like, critical thinking has to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. Part of critical thinking is how we think and ask questions. So specifically earlier this year in another podcast that I listened to, and it was a podcast about finances, but it's just something that stuck with me. But he said the quality of our lives depends so much on the questions that we ask, right? And more than that, not just the quality of the questions, like you have to ask the right question to the right person at the right time in the right order, because you can have great questions, but if it's not pertinent to the subject or in the context, or know when to ask that follow-up question, how to ask a question. Sometimes people blurt out questions in a random meeting, and I'm like, cool, that's a great question, but it has nothing to do, like there's a whole separate meeting on Thursday for that. But what's one high signal question that you have found particularly useful when trying to determine the quality of anyone, from a salesperson to an athlete, or as generic things, right? But yeah, what's one high quality question when you're evaluating someone like that you like to ask? And for me, just to kind of show you my example, what leads to your happiest times and best performance at work? What's something that you found like your go-to?
I think typically, and it's an interesting question. I don't know if it's my high level question, so I'll probably have to get back to you on this, but in my feedbacks that I have, and I've done this for a couple of years, I ask my team, like, describe to me your perfect Saturday. Ooh. If you had nothing on your calendar and you were able to just spend time from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., like, what would you do? Because I think that gets into the person of where they spend their time. What things do they prioritize? How do they look at life? The pace at which they operate, right? Because if someone has a jam-packed schedule in that day, they're probably going to be a fast-paced person. But if someone likes leisure, or if someone likes to sit and read or relax, or take in the day, they're probably going to operate at a slower pace. And for me as a leader, that helps me understand how I should engage with them, how I should approach them, right? I know just because of my energy, I can come very big. But if you're a person who likes a slower pace, or you like to relax or leisure, you probably don't want that high level 10 energy coming to you with a question. So I have to meet you at a different place. And I think the responses I've gotten to that has been fairly interesting, because we don't ever sit and think about what we would do with just a free day. I know we typically say, hey, I'm happy that we get Friday off. Okay, here are all the tasks I have to do. Here are all the things I have to catch up on. But like, if no one gave you any sort of calendar or plans for that day, how would you spend that time throughout the day? I think has been probably the high level question, at least from my level, that I found the most interesting.
Following up with going back to your education background, your experiences in the military, and then absent the systems and the frameworks you have honed over time, what has made you a good talent hunter and a talent evaluator at such a young age? And you are young. I know how old you are. More than that, you look younger than you are.
Thank you.
You look like you're in grad school at Southern New Hampshire.
You've done your research. I love it. I love it.
SNHU.
I would say I'm still developing it, right? I'm still developing the teams. And I think and I say I'm still developing it because I feel like you move into a phase where you're good at identifying the talent, but then it forces you to grow as a leader, officer, mentor of how do you continue to cultivate that talent, right? Because the skills that work for Captain Jones are not what works for Major Jones. So how do I continue? Okay, I'm bringing in this good talent. How do I give them feedback? How do I continue to support that in a more elevated way? So I would say I'm still developing it. I would say a lot of my mentors that I've gotten through life and just through my career have really encouraged a lot of that within myself. And I think that's why I've taken such a, love for it in terms of, hey, if your first line supervisor, right, for my officers, which is me, the major, is not giving you feedback or not giving you like that mentorship, I'm not worth my salt, right? It's nice to have the squadron commander be able to provide that as well. But if you're a captain, you're not going to be a lieutenant colonel for quite some time. The first boat you're going to hit is being a major and being a DO. So how do I give you feedback from my perspective, introduce you to the spaces I'm in, so you have that exposure and that understanding. And that's what I've gotten throughout my career and through my life. So it's kind of like the pay it back is why I feel like I'm good at understanding that talent, but also that I want to continue to develop that as I bring these highly talented individuals within my circle.
Okay, so you just mentioned about bringing highly talented people within your circle. And what ways have others helped you surface your hidden assumptions? And what's your advice on how a coach or a leader can do the same for other people?
Offering that transparency, right? So I have made my office the people's office, essentially, right? So
Is there a picture of The Rock in there?
Exactly. Oh, nice reference. Yeah. A lot of people will say they have an open door policy. Yeah. Sure, right? Especially when you move into like a professional setting, that open door policy may not always be what you want it to be. Before at least the folks I directly supervise, right? And even a layer below that, it is come into my office and we can talk about anything. I also give the transparency to the fact of I'm not tied to it. Obviously, if it's a thought or a concept or idea that must be executed, absolutely. But I'm not tied to anything. I'm always open to feedback. And if you want to come in the office and behind closed doors say, hey, sorry, I don't think we're moving in the right direction, or I don't think this is applicable because of X, Y, and Z, we can absolutely have that conversation. And I think more people, at least in some of the spaces, right, that you had mentioned, have to be open to that, to saying, hey, your idea is just not the greatest idea for where we're at in time right now. Hopefully you're doing that research as a leader, but you have to be open to hearing, hey, sir, hey, ma'am, like, this is just not where we're going. Yeah. This is not where we're at, or the people are not moving in this mindset. Maybe we need to communicate more, build more foundational elements for them to operate in, or just take a step back and say, okay, let me put this on the back burner and pass it on to someone else. I was listening to a podcast a couple of days ago, and the advice that the individual had given to the students in the room was, hey, just as much as you want a mentor or senior leader's attention, they want your attention. So I speak now, even though I'm fairly young, I speak to the folks that I lead because they're typically younger than myself. Like, I also want to learn from them. So I don't want it to feel like, hey, Major Jones's thought is the only thought, or that's the thought that we're all pressing forward with. Yeah. I want to hear your feedback, and I want to have that transparency to say, okay, I'm looking at it through a different lens or through a different perspective.
What's the name of the podcast?
So it was actually Rethinking by Adam Grant. So he, So he had interviewed Carla Harris, who is vice chairman of Morgan Stanley. Okay. I think she might have moved from that position. But their interview was from a live session they had at the Wharton School of Business. So you can find it on YouTube as well. But that was just kind of one of her elements of like, hey, like when you're looking at mentorship, sponsorship, which is the theme of that particular episode, she was like, as much as you want their attention, they want your attention because they want you part of their team, being senior leaders to junior leaders. They want you part of their team. They want your ideas. They want your loyalty, right, to the concept, to the organization. So that works in a mutual way. That's
a fantastic point because I never thought, I always, we think about two-way mentorship and like, hey, mentorship is two ways, but to actually be more specific, like that's it right there. Like we do want people's attention because it's how we can help better serve people. That's a great point. I have to check that out. I have one last serious question.
Sure.
Then I'm getting some fun questions.
Okay.
I think, you've been in for 10 plus years, but sometimes it's not so much. People look at, I see this a lot of when people hit a certain rank, especially like senior NCOs or maybe some high officer ranks, they lead with like their how long they've been in, right? Like that's what makes them qualified. Sure, in some cases, I don't think just how long someone's been in automatically gives them experiences. It just gives them to have had more opportunities to have experiences, right? So when people are like, I've been in for 20 years, cool, you could have experienced nothing during that time. Absolutely. But, you've been in for, 10 years or 10 plus. But I think just from talking, we know a lot of the same people. And, you've been around some talent.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And some cool missions and everything. But what do you think is the difference between successful individuals, teams, and larger organizations?
Oh, great question. I would say successful individuals is that self-awareness, right? So I bring that back to self-awareness, understanding what you bring to the table, because then you can come to your authentic self. For teams, it's cultivating all of that diversity. And like you say, it doesn't have to be race, gender. It's diversity of thought. It's diversity of perspective. And diversity of just experience. Like you said, someone could have been in 20 years and they might not have experienced everything that could have happened. Where I could have an airman who has been in for 4 years, deployed 3 times, worked in this special unit,
100%.
And they're going to bring a whole different perspective. So that should not exclude them just based off rank or age from the table. And then for the team, it's really the culture, right? Like, what is the culture that you're trying to cultivate? What is the brand? And I appreciate that's kind of where our organization is right now, is what is the brand that we're trying to push out? And people look at brand as a negative thing, right? But I appreciate the concept of brand and marketing yourself coming into our individual lives, but also just our organization lives. Like, for me to say, hey, I was part of this particular team, you can probably think of certain organizations within the Air Force where you're like, that's a pretty elite team.
Yeah.
But for me to look at myself and say, I was part of this organization, that's huge. And for people to think, oh, well, that's a highly regarded organization. This is the quality of work, the caliber of people that they hire onto a team. And you were a leader within that organization. That's a huge thing. So individuals is self-awareness. Team is a cultivating the different concepts, ideas, and perspectives that are brought through that self-awareness. And then the organization is a culture and building that brand. And that brand should translate to the individual brands, but also what does the organization as a brand want to put out there? I think, again, when you look at like the public sector and where people are looking for jobs, right? We joined the Air Force because of a certain brand that it has. And people may make light of that, oh, it's the chair force or whatever the case may be. But there are certain reasons why we joined the Air Force. There are certain attributes that come to mind when people say the Air Force over the other services. And just like our other brothers and sisters in arms, whichever branch you're in. But when you look outside in the public sector, there's a reason why people want to work at Apple. There's a reason why people want to work at Google, why they want to work at Starbucks, because they have brands and they know if I'm part of that, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm getting after. And that translates because they can say my personal brand fits into that organizational brand. And in between, there's a culture and cultivation of what I'm going to bring to the table that can fit into that larger puzzle. So that's what I will offer to that.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm very much about branding and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And Michelle Martz and I talk about, because I'm a communications major, but, communications, marketing, to me, it all kind of blends together.
It does. Harvard Business Review did a really good article. I think it was last month or the previous month that covers the self-branding. And it was really thought out and just a good read. So good. If you have some time, check it out.
All right. I have some miscellaneous questions.
Okay.
There's no rhyme or reason.
Okay.
These are all over the place.
Oh, gosh.
It's fun questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you nervous?
I don't know.
You should be. I should have asked at the beginning, like, hey, have you done a podcast before?
I've not.
That's so crazy because, there's certain people, I'm like, you can just tell, like we were talking about the Real World earlier. Like if you were on that show, like you'd be the breakout star of Jersey Shore or Real World or Road Rules or whatever. But
MTV was good, right?
Yeah. But there's certain people with personalities. I've mentioned Hartstein a couple times.
Absolutely.
Even Mo Love and some other people. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Well, I suspect that you'll now be a frequent guest.
I appreciate it.
All right, these are just random. This made me laugh, and I was kind of giddy at like 12:30, whatever, when I was typing this up. What is something people would be surprised to learn about you?
Oh, I don't know if I should put this. I guess so. When I was young, I guess at least my personality when I was young, there was a PBS show. It was called like Bloopy, and it was like a kid's like exercise show. Anyways, my mom put me on that when I was young. So there's like a couple episodes, I think, out there in the world where you can see a smaller version of me on the show. So that's probably what people would be surprised to find out. I don't know if people would be surprised, but yeah. You don't have to search it, but
I'm going to. We'll see what happens. What's it called again?
Bloopy. Yeah, it's very kid puppet like.
Thank you for sharing that. That's gold. That is podcast gold.
I don't know what I just signed myself up for, but it's out there now.
If you were to host a dinner party with 5 guests, past or present, who would you invite and why? And it can't be family members.
Oh, that's a great question. I'd probably invite a couple of presidents to that table. I'll at least have 2 seats for presidents.
I'll count presidents as 1.
Okay.
But who are the 2 or 3?
Probably our more recent presidents, right? So probably President Obama, President Bush. I would just like to hear, right, like how you think about, you have the highest office in the land. What are the decisions you go through? How do you pick things up? How do you?
That's great because to me, I love the fact that what appears to be a good relationship Absolutely. To the public. And I think that's so important because 2 opposite ends of the political parties or whatever.
Absolutely.
But, we see the stuff with Michelle, like George Bush flirting with Michelle. But I think whether, who knows if they truly hate it, whatever. But I think it's so important just for people to see, whereas there's some banter and all that stuff. And I've heard President Bush, I saw, maybe in 2008 or something, 2009. I guess it had been 2009, but shortly after Obama took office, where it was a news clip, but Obama walked in and like Bush stood like upright and stuff and said, "Hey, Mr. President." Like I just thought that was so good. Yeah. Anyway, I think there's a lesson there to be taught about
It is.
humility and ego and sorry, we're going on a rabbit hole, but all right, Bush and Obama count as one.
Probably Oprah. I feel like everyone wants Oprah, right? Because
Did you want her to pay for dinner?
A little bit, right? But when you think about a person who started in journalism, right, and just the height of her breakout into journalism and getting a syndicated show that's been on TV for years and just building an empire from that, right? Trying to think what else.
And a brand.
And a brand, right? Bob Iger, who's the CEO of Disney. So his book, what is it called? It is the cover of it is coming to mind, but he writes not a autobiography, but it's something along those lines. I mean, it starts off with the shooting, the Pulse Club shooting, and he was about to give a presentation and how the armed gunman was actually planning to go to Disneyland. And partake in that accident. And so it talks about his career from then to now, and how he retired as CEO of Disney. And then he stepped away for a couple of years, and they recently brought him back to lead the organization as they get a new CEO. So very fascinating book, just different approach to how someone's journey can manifest through life. So I think that would be an interesting conversation. So that's 3. Oh, gosh. I'll probably add Michelle Obama just for personal interest.
Okay.
And then who would be my 5th one? I will still have to think on the 5th one, but I would love to hear from, and I would say a creative, right? Either an artist or a author. So many come to mind right now, so that's why it takes some time for me to sit and think. But someone who is able to translate the world in the current state that it is at the time that they are producing work, right? How do you translate that into words? How do you translate that into artwork? How do you like your mind look at that and say, this is the pain, the emotion, the happiness the world is feeling, and put that into words or through on a framework, right? So many come to mind, so I'll have to dwindle that list down. But I would say at least have 4 solid.
I'm gonna pick someone for you.
Who?
Malcolm Gladwell.
Okay.
And then his, I've read 2 of his books, but Outliers is the one
that's really, such a good one.
Yeah, and it really helped me. I just read that maybe 3 years ago, or it was 3 years ago. Either way, it's helped me think about things differently. All right, just wrapping up. What 2 to 3 books do you recommend specifically? Because we talked about talent management, but even talking about talent management, you used the word branding and self-awareness a couple different times. So what 2 to 3 books regarding talent management, branding, and self-awareness do you recommend, or would you recommend to people?
I would say Outliers is a good one. I read that when I was a young officer many, many years back, and that is a great one to always start with. I'm currently reading Range, which is how generalists exist in kind of like a specialized world, right? Because we're always taught, especially when you look at Tiger Woods and stuff, hey, like focus on this one thing, get really good at this one thing. But in reality, we need a broad range of skills to look at a problem differently. And then what would my 3rd one be? There is another one that I read. It is How to Connect in a Digital World. And I don't know if it falls within the talent management branding perspective, but it is, I'll get the author, but it's pretty much we're moving in a digital space, right? Whether it's how we communicate via email or Teams or Zoom, but it's how to connect via that means. And I think when we talk about that talent management piece, right, like it's through connection. People are able to see who you are and what you bring through that connection. And because our world is moving digitally and we look at Gen Z and understanding how they view the world, which is probably going to be through a digital platform, I think it takes a lot for me as a leader to kind of understand that and how to do better and kind of sharpen that iron from my end.
I have a couple bonus questions.
Sure, let's go.
This conversation, and I think you'll enjoy this.
Okay.
What are some new friendships you developed over the past 2 to 3 years that you know are going to be a lifelong bond?
Oh, that's a great one. I would definitely say, so I have a couple of peers right now And it's partly right coming just through the job, but then I think when you work day to day with some of these people and you have that ability to look at like, hey, this organization, how are you doing, and checking in beyond the job. So can I call out specific names?
Yes.
Oh, so yeah. Well, I mean, I knew Schwo from forever ago, but definitely Vader, and then Louis Ho, like good friends. I'll probably carry on. I think my original like DO team, right, coming in will probably be friends that last beyond. I would say I've been very blessed and fortunate, because this is 2-3 years, very blessed and fortunate to have just really good supervisors. And it's really good supervisors in the sense of, I guess to frame it, right, like feedback sessions. Feedback sessions can be very like generic, right?
Yeah.
Let me just jot out some notes on paper. But both my previous and current supervisor have both just been fantastic in the, let's sit down, let's just like talk about life, and let's talk about who you are as a human, and kind of accepting my whole being outside of just being like their DO. Those are friendships that I hope and I think will last probably beyond. And then there is one from my previous assignment. There was a captain I worked with. He's out now, Kekai Nuahiva. And so we joined the team, right? So we're, being in ROTC, we're a small team. So it's typically 3 officers and 2 enlisted personnel. So him and I are like the action officers, essentially. And like, he was younger than me, because I had rank and just like different experience than me. Grew up in Hawaii, went to the academy, worked in finance. And then I obviously like different places, grew up in San Diego. But just like the connection and the bond that we were able to build in the 2 years of knowing each other. And like when you think about the first year of that was primarily over Zoom because COVID, but then coming together and just kind of like being tied at the hip. And the cadets will actually make fun of it because I was like, oh, if we see Major Jones, we're going to see Captain Nuahiva as well. And so they got us shirts when at my gun away that says thing 1 and thing 2, but it's it's wild kind of connecting with him nowadays. And even though he's out now and just kind of seeing how happy he is and just like the different avenues he's pursuing, but that's a relationship that I really cherish, because it's not even someone who was like same rank, same age, parallel, is someone who's younger than me, but just like the ability of like a natural easiness that kind of came with that relationship.
That's awesome.
So I would say those are probably the relationships in the 2 to 3 year time frame that are probably and hopefully going to be lifelong relationships.
Now, I just started asking that, and because I've developed a couple over the past 2 years. I love that question, and it's just something I'm going to keep asking in podcasts. I think
it's a great one.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that feedback. Yeah, and sometimes you just know, like you just hit it off with someone.
Yeah.
This is my person. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and there's many people like that aren't on that list that I didn't mention. So I hope no one like listens.
That's why I say the past 2 to 3 years, right? There's got to be a cutoff line. But there's even some people I had to cut out of my life that you need to think like, oh man, now I don't have any. But it also makes room for new people.
Yes,
and it's like, you know what? I was friends with that person. That was the old chapter of my life, and we're still acquaintances. But it's not. I'm going in a different direction now.
And I think that's important. So I love that you said that. Right, like. I think as I've gotten older, people always think like for friendships to end, it has to be a huge event. I'm like, no, people just like grow differently, or they have different priorities or different focus items. So everything doesn't have to be a huge catastrophe as to why we fall out. It's just, I'm just in a different path in my life or a different chapter, and I have, like you said, open up the door for different people to kind of come in.
And there's even some other friends that my friendships, like people I was, always been friends with, but the bond is, even I've known for a long time, it's grown even stronger because, I like having conversations now about, hey, like, what's a cool business we could do, or what's fun, or if we could run a business on a Saturday.
Oh,
or
yeah.
Like, hey, like let's talk like how cool, like what are some cool, let's talk investing or real estate or, where do you want to travel to next and stuff like that. Do you know Brianna McQueen by chance?
Yes.
Or formerly Applebee.
Yes.
She's got married, so I don't know if McQueen. So she's one of my favorite people on earth. But she's someone I have, I will fight someone for her. Like she's incredible. She's another person I can't imagine anyone not liking. She's just such an incredible human being. So I was a flight chief in Hawaii, and she was the sister flight commander.
Yeah.
But her and I just, and this was in like 2016, but her, to this day, it's been a while since I've talked to her, but anyway, like every time I talk to her, we'll talk for like 2 hours.
Yep.
Not necessarily about work, but like, hey, what's a cool opportunity? Because she was doing something out of the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And then but we talk about traveling and food. And it's just,
I think that's great.
yeah.
Because like you said, it's coming back together and being able to connect, right? Even if you have that gap in time where you're communicating, it's just like we come back together and it's like old times. We can just engage and laugh and like talk about life.
Food centered was a focus of your and I's early conversations. The Basic SLI last year, we were talking about restaurants and stuff.
Yes. Sitting at the I table.
That's right. The I table. The I table. I forgot about that. All right, last two questions.
Okay.
If there was a movie made about your life,
who
would play you? Don't worry, I have a recommendation. And what would the name of your movie be?
Oh gosh. Okay. I have no idea. I feel like I'm going to over glamorize this. I'll give the flowers like Michael B. Jordan, right? Because it could play like a just beefier, like more, I guess, attractive version of myself.
Guy is on top of the world.
You know what I mean? And then I've been watching Snowfall lately, and was it Damon Idris who plays the titular character, or not titular because it's not bad, but the lead character? He will probably be my other person who will play me.
So that show's on my must. I will watch soon because I have a couple friends who are into it. But that's great. You said Michael B. Jordan. I had someone else in mind.
Who did you have in mind?
But it's funny because it ties up it links on two. I swear I had this. It ties in on two fronts. So one of my favorite actors is Idris Elba. And he was on The Wire with Michael B.
Yes.
And obviously Idris, right? But I don't know. I just think, and I hope he becomes like a future James Bond. Like to me, he's an obvious choice.
That was like the goal.
He's British, and then there's this whole thing like we can't like who cares if James I don't care if James Bond is black, but to me they got to be British or or Irish or whatever. Like that's, but he would be phenomenal, I think. Last question: if there was a giant billboard with your picture on it and your message on it for the world to see, where would you want that billboard to be? Anywhere in the world, and what would you want that message to say? And everyone has to read it.
Oh, that is a solid question. It would definitely be something along the lines of like you're at where you need to be, or something along the lines of that, right? Like you're exactly where you need to be. Because I feel like people need that reminder sometimes of like either putting too much pressure on themselves or like, oh, I'm trying to do this and I just don't feel like I'm getting there. And it's like, no, you're where you need to be. Like you're on the path. You're doing what needs to get done. Where it would be, that's a great question. I don't know why the first thought that comes to my mind is probably near a university or something like that, right? Near a university or just an institute of like learning, and that could be a trade school, whatever the case may be. Because I feel like when people usually take those opportunities to learn a trade, to go to university, a community college, because I'm a byproduct of community college, or just school in general, right, to like further themselves.
Costa Mesa?
No, Mira Mesa. You were close. You were close. I feel like that's just like, hey, like you're at where you need to be. Like you're doing the right thing. Take your time, get to where you need to go. Your chapter, like it's your book. You make your book like a story that you are proud of. There's no report card for like what success is, right? So so you kind of define what that report card is, right? Like, and I know you can probably resonate with this, Chief, right? Like as you're getting to like that closer to retirement point, even me being 7-ish years from that retirement point, at the end of the day, right? We've gotten the awards, we've gotten the accolades, you've won the quarterlies, angles, whatever the case may be. But like whatever success is, it's not going to be like, oh, like you won Chief of the Quarter. It's going to be truly what your legacy is through here or just through the people you've encountered, right? So that's probably your report card from me knowing you. And so that's what success looks like. So yeah, that would be like my giving. Yeah, I was like, hopefully I can close with like a good one.
That's it, man. There's some, when I chop this up and edit it, like there's some gems.
No, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. As you know, I've mentioned a couple of times before and during the show, like you've been on my guest list. So it feels good just to like, it's so good to check that off, right?
Thank you.
I've wanted to have this conversation with you because you bring so much to the table, and it's not just like one thing. Like you bring, if this is Thanksgiving, like you're bringing like 3 main dishes that are all on point, right? So
I appreciate that.
yeah. So just thanks for who you are. Like I'm proud to serve with you, and I'm proud who you are as like a young leader. And like I want to follow you. I want to be around you. I want to hear what you have to say. And I know I'm not alone in this. I know there are many others out there as well. Like you, I don't know. Like there's a lot of like shining stars, but yours has like this different brighter tint that's just like who's that guy? Like oh man, I like the way he presents himself in meetings and stuff. So again, this is an honor. Thank you so much.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
That concludes another episode of Passing the Torch. Big thanks to my guest, Trevion Jones. If this is your first time listening to my show, here's a quick bio about me. I am active duty military and have served for 21 years. I started this podcast in January of 2018 because I've met so many wonderful people in my life. I love meeting new people, having conversations, learning their history, and sharing their story. If you want to support and you enjoyed the podcast, it would mean the world to me if you could follow, rate 5 stars, and leave a positive review on Apple Podcasts. If you are someone who listens on Spotify, please follow and rate 5 stars on there as well. If you found value in the episode, took something away from the conversation, and appreciated the insight, chances are there is someone out there who may as well. So I appreciate it when you share. You can text the episode to a friend and tag me on social media. Let me know what you were able to take away. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. And finally, remember, vision, relate, develop. Take care, everyone. Foster out.